If you care about how ordinary people actually survived World War II, not the polished version taught in classrooms, but the lived reality shaped by ration cards, black markets and quiet defiance, then, well, subscribe to Legacy of Survival right now and share this channel with someone who takes history seriously. What we're covering today isn't nostalgia or trivia. It's the uncomfortable truth about how governments, even while claiming to protect civilians, actively restricted access to items people needed to endure hunger, cold, and insecurity. Understanding these regulations matters because they reveal where official policy collided with human survival, and those lessons are still relevant today. During the Second World War, nearly every major combatant imposed sweeping civilian controls under the banner of total war. These rules were presented as patriotic necessities, yet many of them deliberately suppressed practical survival tools that allowed families to stay fed, warm, and self-sufficient. When you dig into wartime diaries, court records, and enforcement manuals, a pattern emerges. Anything that reduced dependence on centralized distribution was treated as a threat. The suppression of food preservation tools is one of the clearest examples. In Britain, home canning equipment became quietly discouraged once rationing tightened under the authority of the Ministry of Food. Officials worried that civilians preserving surplus food would undermine ration equity and obscure accurate supply data. Pressure cookers, essential for safe meat and vegetable canning, were restricted in production and sometimes seized for scrap drives. The practical result was that families who had gardens or access to rural produce were forced to consume food immediately or let it spoil. Those who ignored guidance and preserved food anyway risked fines or confiscation. The lesson here is simple and uncomfortable. Systems prioritize control over resilience. A modern survivalist studying this period should take note of how low-profile preservation methods, such as dehydration or fermentation, avoided attention precisely because they required fewer regulated tools. Fuel restrictions tell a similar story. Coal, wood, and even kerosene were tightly regulated across Europe. In Nazi-occupied territories, possessing more fuel than officially allocated could trigger investigations for hoarding or resistance activity. In Germany itself, civilians were prohibited from cutting fallen timber without permits, even during harsh winters. Enforcement records show elderly citizens prosecuted for gathering firewood in nearby forests. From a survival perspective, this demonstrates how essential it is to understand local resource laws in crisis situations and to plan alternative heating strategies that do not rely on conspicuous fuel stockpiles. Small, efficient stoves and shared heat spaces became survival solutions, precisely because they attracted less scrutiny. Clothing repair and material reuse were also regulated in ways that, well, might seem quite counterintuitive today. Governments promoted make-do and mend propaganda, but at the same time they controlled access to needles, thread, and durable fabrics. In the United States, the War Production Board limited civilian garment production to conserve textiles for uniforms. Heavy coats, reinforced shoes and workwear were especially restricted. People adapted by trading services instead of goods, repairing garments in informal networks, and, repurposing military surplus that was sometimes illegally obtained through dock workers or factory contacts. This teaches a key survival principle: skills often matter more than supplies. Tailoring, cobbling and basic textile repair were quietly more valuable than money. Radios and information tools occupy a darker corner of wartime suppression. In occupied Europe, owning an unregistered radio could result in imprisonment or even execution. Authorities understood that access to information was, honestly, as powerful as access to food. Even in Allied countries, listening to foreign broadcasts was discouraged or outright criminalized. From a survival standpoint, this really highlights the importance of decentralized communication. People passed news orally, used coded language, and relied on trusted social networks rather than official channels. Modern parallels are, pretty obvious, and the wartime example shows just how quickly information itself can become contraband. Gardening tools and urban livestock restrictions further demonstrate how survival independence was curtailed. While victory gardens were publicly encouraged, many cities banned keeping chickens, rabbits or goats due to sanitation concerns. Enforcement was uneven but real. Court cases from London and New York document confiscated animals and fines levied against families supplementing rations with protein sources. The practical takeaway is that food production was tolerated only when it remained visible, controllable and symbolic. Quiet, small-scale production was safer than anything that challenged official narratives of supply sufficiency. Medical supplies were another category quietly restricted. Vitamins, antiseptics, and even basic bandages were regulated to prioritize military use. Civilians resorted to herbal remedies, reused dressings, and informal care networks. Studying this period reminds us that redundancy in medical knowledge, not just stockpiles, is critical. Knowing how to clean wounds with boiled water or substitute materials mattered when official supplies vanished. What ties all of this together is a hard truth. Wartime governments did not simply manage scarcity, they enforced dependency. Survival often depended on knowing which rules were rigidly enforced and which could be bent quietly without drawing attention. People who survived best were observant, adaptable, and deeply connected to their communities. If you want to apply this knowledge today, study how regulations shape behavior during emergencies. Learn practical skills that don't rely on control tools, and understand that resilience often lives below the surface of official systems. History shows us that survival isn't rebellion for its own sake. It's the careful navigation of power, necessity, and human ingenuity. If this kind of deep, uncomfortable history matters to you, subscribe to Legacy of Survival. Share this episode with a fellow historian or preparedness-minded friend, and keep this knowledge alive. The past still has teeth, and it still has lessons worth learning.